So what we'll try to do today is just use basic principles to understand how to use nuclear medicine in urology. Most of you have already been doing. You've been operating on urological patient based on reports and everything. But it's always good to know the basic principles because 90% of the time things are straightforward and you don't have an issue. But occasionally you do get stumped with some confusing reports which doesn't match the picture, or something which you go by and suddenly on table you find some surprises and all those things. So as a habit in the beginning, it may be good to just go through every single scan from the point of how you did the test to the interpretation of the result before you start becoming experts and just say by looking at the picture I can decide whether to operate or not, or whether to conserve, or whether how to operate and all those things. Now our main issues come up when we have hydronephrosis, where we need to decide whether you need to label it as a PUJ obstruction requiring surgery or to conserve and follow up. There are a lot of problems with these diagnoses, whether we should be operating. All protocols keep differing, differential parameters which they use for cutoff for surgical intervention keep differing. So we will not get into those things today because that's a totally different discussion altogether. And the second group of patients are the megaureters, where you have a megaureter. You would probably go and do a MCU. There is no reflux. You don't know whether it's a missed reflux or whether it's some VUJ obstruction or it's a non-obstructing, non-refluxing megaureter, because again management options would vary. So when you come to the principles, basic principles, nuclear medicine, whether it is a HIDA scan, whether it's a DMSA, whether it's the renogram, whatever it is, the principles are the same. What we would be using is a radiopharmaceutical, which is basically a combination of a pharmaceutical agent which is specific to the organ which you would be evaluating. So if it's a kidney and you're looking at dynamic thing, you will be looking at something which is handled by the nephron. If it is kidney static thing, which is something handled by the retained by the cortex. If it is liver, if you're looking at the parenchymal thing, you do sulfur. If you're looking at again dynamic biliary tract evaluation, you look at HIDA. So the list goes on. I mean, you can even use it for ventriculoperitoneal shunt evaluations and all those things. Basically, the radioactive isotope is the label. And when you are recording the activity with the gamma camera, it just keeps showing you where the radioactivity is going on and how it is going. And then using softwares, all this information is converted into graphs or pictures, and then give you basic information. So based on which organ and or this thing will go. So when coming to urology, we are going to limit ourselves to the radioactive isotope, whether it's technetium, and the pharmaceutical, which depending on what you are evaluating, whether it is for hydronephrosis. Nowadays, of course, we started off probably around 15 years back when we used to look at DTPA only, then DTPA versus MAC3, and EC, which came on, which is a poor man's MAC3, which subsequently came on, versus cortically retained agents, the DMSA and GHA. The GHA had the unique this thing of distinction of having a combination of cloth glomerular filtration and cortical excretion. So they used to, in between transition period, use GHA in the initial phase for hydronephrosis to rule out obstruction or confirm obstruction, and the delayed pictures to look at scarring. So GHA was one agent which used to give both information, but it had its own drawbacks, and with better agents coming, that has been given up. So we will be basically focusing on tubular secreted agents and a cortical retained agent. Glomerular filtered agent, basically our DTPA, has specific roles, and we will talk about that later, but it is not, or it's almost given up in routine evaluation for urological evaluation for obstruction versus non-obstruction. So there are certain concerns which come up when we use this any radiation. I mean, nowadays with so much of awareness, every patient has concerns about whatever we do, whether it is surgery, whether it is the investigative modality. I just put up this slide because around 6 months back, I had a parent coming back to challenge me as to why I did an isotope scan on his presently 10-year-old, but in the new infancy, to rule out obstruction, and saying that I had actually subjected him to high risk for cancer. So this is just a small slide to tell you, for counseling the patient, that yes, young children are more susceptible to radiation, but in spite of that, whatever these isotope scans you do, the amount of radiation is significantly low. So just to compare, the natural environmental radiation, especially if you look at Kerala, where it has been touted as having more ground terrestrial radiation, it is less than 70% of the annual natural environmental radiation, which is itself supposed to be safe. And furthermore, all the X-ray technicians, radiographers, radiology department personnel who are dealing with CT scans, X-rays, area of high radiation, using their the meter which records the amount of radiation, cumulative radiation they accumulate. The amount of radiation which any of these scans give, in spite of repeated scanning, is less than 5% of the allowable radiation to healthcare workers. So if you have a radiology technician who's doing X-rays daily, and his meter has that, and he says up to particular amount of radiation is permissible for him safely, what we are subjecting these patients is to less than 5% of that. So these two is something you keep in mind when somebody questions you, so that you have definitely well within your this thing to say that we are not really subjecting them to significant radiation. I mean, it is lesser than eating 600 bananas in a year. And coming to what we add on, the sedation, some of them use sedation because there is a lot of movement artifacts, especially in children and infants. It is difficult to keep them quiet, especially when you're doing 20 minutes of continuous activity recording, keeping them under a gamma camera in a cold environment. So they prefer to use sedation, but sedation tends to interfere with diuresis. So there are been this becomes an issue when you have these borderline situations, and you have borderline situation where there is significant hold up in the delayed picture, some drainage, and you're still not very clear whether it is an obstruction requiring intervention or something which you can conserve and follow up. So as much as possible, what most of the pediatric nuclear medicine specialists have come up with is to give a very good feed and nicely wrap up the baby, and then use this sort of approach to when the baby is sleeping. And there are enough softwares to correct movement artifacts to some amount. Of course, when it is gross, you cannot definitely do it. But the common, what we experience movement artifact, there are softwares to correct those movement artifacts. Then discussion about glomerular with tubular agents, we'll go out to that a little more. There are certain things which we need to know. One is before doing the test itself, the indication, what are the information you have, not just an ultrasound report saying hydronephrosis and things. So the indications to evaluate whether there is obstruction or no obstruction, or whether it is evaluation for urinary tract infection, or some specific evaluations like the duplex system, horseshoe kidney, has to be very clear cut. And that is again something which all of you will be having discussed earlier. We're not going to take those aspects now, but this is with respect to the doing the test itself. Dehydration is very important. We'll just see a couple of examples how hydration influences the investigation curves and graphs and interpretation. So when you draw, then once that is there, then the movement artifacts, when you start recording, at what point of time will you start checking at the differential function? How will you draw the backgrounds to calculate the, ROI to calculate the differential function and to look at the accumulation of the isotopes and then washout of the isotopes? How will you use subtraction of backgrounds, especially in situations where the creatinine is a little high, or the situation is a bilateral hydronephrosis with compromised kidney where there's a lot of background activity? What type of diuretic protocol you would use, whether it is -15, 0, or F20, whether we should use catheterization or not use catheterization? There are a lot of these technical issues which are there, which you can, we will discuss about the implications of which as we go on. You're hearing me? Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any questions up to now?
No, sir.
Okay. So, like I said, there is a specific role for DTPA. Nowadays, it is limited to looking at post-transplant situations. So, a child, a person who's had a renal transplant, to check whether the kidney is functioning, whether the glomerular filtration is appropriate or not. And in adults, DTPA used to calculate GFR. We'll discuss about GFR a little lower down. But as of now, in children, we have more or less given up DTPA for evaluation for obstruction. Yes, transplant evaluation definitely has a role. What we are concerned with, tubular agents, MAC3 and EC. Now, both are more or less equal in specificity, sensitivity, but EC has certain benefits over MAC3. Now, if you look at most of the literatures on alternatives to DTPA on tubular agents, most of the Western literatures, you'll see papers and all which have come out about MAC3 are all from the Western centers, and most of the papers are on MAC3. Recently, few centers have started actually talking about EC. EC mostly comes out with the countries like India, Africa, and Middle East, and all those things. Basically, the EC and MAC3 used to be initially prepared by the same company, and MAC3 being more expensive, that was sort of touted as a better agent. So anyway, EC and MAC3 is more or less the same. If you have MAC3 availability and you have got people who can afford to use MAC3, you can still use it. But there are a little better advantages with EC, which we'll discuss as we go down. Now,
Sir, 1 second, sir. Sir, there is a pop-up message telling that the meeting will end in 5 minutes. So in case it ends, we'll rejoin again, sir.
Okay. So that is probably because it's a free version, probably.
Yes.
Okay. So when you look at a diuretic renogram, there are certain things which you have to look at when you're interpreting. Most of a diuretic renogram will have pictures like this. So you will have one which shows a perfusion graph, and the perfusion graph will basically tell you whether this is again important, because if you're going to sending a child to a center who is regularly used to pediatric nuclear medicine, getting good IV access and all, it's fine. Or if you're sending a child who's already had an IV line for 2-3 days and then send them when you don't know whether the IV access is patent or not, it's going to be difficult. So what we need to look at is the aortic curve. Now, the aortic, in the initial few seconds, the isotope comes rapidly into the aorta, starting at a very high level, and then gradually it will start. I mean, if you continue this recording on the aortic ROA further down, this would have gradually disappeared and this would have started increasing. Basically, it's an extraction from the aorta by both the renal arteries. But if you look at the aortic curve, and aortic curve is something low down, like what you would see in a poorly functioning kidney. Many times when you have a curve of this in a poorly functioning kidney, 20%, 10%, you would see that there's no curve at all. It's just a flat line coming like this. If the aortic curve is looking like that, low, always try to look at this picture. On the cine, if you have a bigger picture, you will see that lot of activity is accumulating in the arm where the IV line is. Basically, it implies there's extravasation of your contrast isotope, and it has never reached the circulation in full bolus, and little bit is getting absorbed and small amounts is getting into the circulation. So first look at the aortic curve, make sure it is having a good count, and then of course this will not go beyond that, but at least the beginning quickly reaching some peak, and then the renal extraction curves also will start picking up. If this is continued and the graphs adjusted, it will actually look like the aortic curve is starting at one particular point and coming down, whereas the renal curves are starting low and going up. So just something like ICF, ECF volume pre and post delivery graphs which are there. So that will be an ideal graph. But yes, that is one thing you look at. Number two, you will have an initial perfusion images, and this image doesn't have that. I will show you in the other one. So there'll be this series which is basically after the second minute. These are all the ROI frames, which will be either 2 per minute or 4 per minute, depending on where protocols they are. The initial corresponding to this, you will have one more picture, which you can see in the following graphs, which will show you the perfusion frames, and that is for every 2 seconds, 1 frame. So that will be for the first 2 minutes or first 1 minute, depending on, again, protocols used by individual labs. So those two graphs will be there, and that graph and this will have to be looked at together. This graph and the picture which comes will be looked at together, and subsequently you will be looking at the time activity curve which corresponds to this graph. So this is a typical normal renogram. What you would typically see is a sudden upgoing, reaching a peak, and then coming down. Most of that would have come down rapidly, and then last residue would have tapering off like this. Now, if you look at these two, the blue one, which represents the left kidney, is also going up equally. So more or less, and generally the function is detected at 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 minutes. So that again, you calculate a differential function. It's again pre-programmed on the computer software. It's either 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 minutes curves, which are continuously taken, the activity is taken, and an average given for each each kidney's count, and then you get a differential function. And the differential function comes up somewhere there. And this actually doesn't need any software. If you look at it, you can easily say that both of this, if you say 0 to 2 minutes, even if you take 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 minutes average between this area, peaks of both are almost matching. So it's very obvious that these are almost equally functioning kidney, 50-50, if not a little here and there. And when you then go back and look at the numbers, you will see that it matches. So try to do this before looking at this, so you get used to analyzing. Try before you look at any reports in your initial days. Take a paper, take the graphs, take all the things, write down your interpretation starting from beginning, starting from whether hydration is adequate or not. We'll come to that, how to detect whether hydration is adequate or not, whether hydration is adequate or not, whether the recording, the active regions of interest have been put correctly or not. So make a template: hydration, ROI, time of recording of activity, correct, wrong. So make a template for yourself, tick each one to say the test is appropriate or there is artifact. Then there is a reading of each parameter which you want to look at, and then make a report for yourself. Then go back to the report which has been given and see whether it matches or not. Initial days, you may find that it's not matching. Then you'll read it and see where you differed from them and whether they were right or you were right. So that is the way I think you should be going about. Then you do around 100 of these, then there'll be nothing, no reports required. You will be experts on your own. Now, this example you see, if you compare this graph with the pictures here, recording here, these are both are non-obstructive, both are coming down. But this graph is a little slower. So probably this would have been one of those hydronephrotic kidneys with stasis, but gradually emptying. And if you look at this graph, it is more or less matching that. The left kidney showing more activity compared to the right gets washed out very quickly, but the left is also getting washed out. So when this difference you can easily appreciate here. So when you look at both together, it's very clear that both are non-obstructive patterns. At the end of the recording itself, 20 minutes of recording itself, you know that there is no obstruction. The whatever accumulation here is completely, almost near completely cleared up. And when you look at the curve, you see that the pattern is downward. Now, you want to look at what we call as T halves, which is again one other parameter which is used, but doesn't have any major implication on that, because when you say, when most of your recording, when they do the scans, are up to 20 or 30 minutes. And T half is considered to be significant only if it is more than what? Hello?
More than 15 minutes.
More than 20 minutes. 15 minutes to 20 minutes is equivocal. Less than 15 is normal. More than 20 is thing. To say more than 20, recording itself is 20 to 30 minutes sometimes, and your downward trend starts somewhere there. You may not get a T half at all, which is, so it's very obvious T half is normal, and most of the normal T halves will be in these sort of graphs, and you don't even need a T half to say this is normal. I mean, or normal in the sense non-obstructive. But just to understand from academic point of view, how do you calculate a T half? T half is the time taken for each kidney for the activity to become half of the peak activity. So for example, you take this kidney, the blue one, that is the left kidney. Peak activity is here, which is somewhere between 300, 350. So let us say 325. So half of 325 would be 160 or so. So 160 will be somewhere here. So when you straight draw the line, it will meet it somewhere here. And that is 22 minutes. And 22 minutes is the end point. And the starting point, so many people make the mistake of calculating 0 to 22 and saying 22 is the T half. T half is starting from the peak. The peak is somewhere here. So that is around 3 minutes. 3 minutes to 20 minutes. So that is 320 minus 317. So it is still normal. Okay. So basically that is the way you would calculate a T half, but really if you use it as a single parameter, it doesn't have any sense. Yeah. And another very important thing about these renogram is never use a single parameter to give a diagnosis. It has to be a combination of parameters, a combination of investigations, everything put together, not just a single isotope scan report or a single parameter. Now, sometimes when you're looking at these, you will start getting biphasic curve. So you see this is coming down similar to the previous curve. This is also a slowly draining curve, and there is, after reaching a particular point, it is tending to go up again. And if you look at these curves, they're all going up and down biphasic curves. Basically, biphasic curves means if your region of interest is like that, the activities from this area is being recorded. Now, biphasic curve, suppose biphasic curve means it's suddenly going down and suddenly coming up. So if you look at this curve, can you give a reason why this sort of biphasic curve is happening? Sudden up, sudden down, sudden up, sudden down. Anyone?
Sir, it may be a vesicoureter reflex where the urine comes back into that, which shows us radioactive uptake.
Okay, so that is one reason. But you think vesicouretic reflex will be the coming up, going down, coming up, going down so rapid within minutes or seconds? What you say is true. It's one of the reasons, and that explains these sort of curve. So the activity came into the pelvis. Pelvis was draining slowly. It emptied into the bladder. Bladder got filled. There was some reflux, so it went up again. So most of the vesicouretic reflex will be like this. When you do an MCU,
Yes,
also,
sir.
you don't see the contrast going up and down rapidly. No, it just goes up and accumulates there. So one of
Yes,
the
sir.
reasons biphasic curve is a vesicouretic reflux. So you would see something like this, or maybe a little more peak, but again coming down and continuing to go down, or continuing to remain slowly up. It won't keep going up and down. What is happening when it's going up and down? That means the activity in that area where you're recording is fluctuating so rapidly. I mean, it's going from 400 or 375 to 150, then again coming to 400. So you won't be having, once the urine has come to the bladder, the activity gets diluted. So you won't get such a high peak of activity. So what happens? This means there is activity increasing and decreasing in the area recording. So that means this circle is moving up and down. Okay, so the maximum activity. So let us say, for example, assume this is the kidney you're looking at. Maximum activity is here. Suppose 1 second your circle moves here. Suddenly your activity is going to drop. Next second it again comes here. It's again going to increase. So what is happening? Why is the curve moving? You're not moving the curve on the computer.
The motion artifact.
Motion.
Yes, baby is moving. So that is typical of a motion artifact. So motion artifacts and reflux are two reasons you may have biphasic curve after coming down, going up. So that is something you'll have to look at. This is very typical motion artifact. And these can be corrected on the screen, and most of the time in the recording itself, they detect that. Sometimes they may go and take corrective measures. Sometimes if it is impossible to do that, they have to frame by frame change the artifact. So what they sit and do is they will take this frame, corresponding ROI will be shifted. Next frame where it is fallen down, this ROI would have moved up. So they will again redraw the ROI. So frame to frame, they'll sit and redraw the ROI, apply the correction, and this whole curve will be converted into a smooth curve. So a lot of work goes on generating the reports. So very important that you have a pediatric nuclear medicine physicist or somebody who knows what they're supposed to be doing. The most important thing is to look at the cine. So in your initial days, one is to have a regular person who knows what is pediatric nephrology with respect to nuclear medicine, and have the same person doing all your reports and scans. Number two, till you are familiar with the person, his or her technique of reporting and interpreting, it will be good to go and discuss each of these investigations with them. So you go and sit with them, go through each step, look at everything is correct or not, and most importantly, look at the cine. So when you look at the cine, the ROI, everything, whatever is drawn will be coming as a continuous picture. You don't need an MCH or a medical person to say that. If you tell the general BSc fellow that blue means urine, and he will definitely say urine came, urine went. So very easy to have an objective assessment of this when you look at the cine. Many times it helps looking at this. So this is another parameter you should definitely be looking at. The third thing and the most important thing, one is the cine, and the next is the looking at the comparing the pre-post void and the delayed pictures. Many times when you look at the pre-void, there will be significant activity. Again, come at bladder effects of bladder drainage pictures, and this curve and the activity here significantly reduces the moment the bladder is emptied, showing good drainage. Other thing what people generally advise and what is supposed to be used in a well-tempered renogram is, once you have done this, before you do this pre-void and delayed initial, they do multiple delayed. Some of them do at 1 hour, 3 hours, some of them do straight away at 2 hours, some of them do after half an hour and 2 hours, 3 multiple. So that varies from lab to lab. But what is generally they ask the mother or father to do is to carry the baby around, walk around, and if it's a big child or an adult, ask them to stand up, sit back, and then again lie down to see the effects of gravity. And many times if it's a redundant pelvis, extrarenal pelvis, the effect of gravity itself will cause significant drainage. So effect of gravity, pre-void versus post-void versus delayed, these are more important parameters to look at rather than just some differential function or curves, time activity curves. And of course the cine. Now
Anand, sorry to interrupt. Anand, Cine is a good concept that is suggested, but is Cine available all the times, or it is available only on request?
Cine will not come to you because it has to be loaded and given to you. What I mean, all these which I have collected are by going and sitting in the labs when we were doing it in Apollo, and then with Murli initial days. But since Murli I knew used to do the way we used to do from beginning, I used to trust this thing. So once you get used to the person, you just accept. But in specific situation, there are two options. One, you go to the lab, sit with that person, go through it in this. But logistically, it may not be possible in an institutional practice because you may not, if the lab is not in your institute, you can't keep going out to look at it. Then in specific situations, most of the time, if you're the report is very obvious, looking at other parameters, you don't need it. But in this ambiguous situation, you can ask them. They will either give it to you on a CD, or you can go ask them to make the Cine and email it to you. Nowadays, with all technology, you can even get it by email, WhatsApp, whatever it is. So they are just like sending a video file. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Anand, one more thing. Vinu is reminding you to plug in your source to the laptop, otherwise you'll be running out of power.
No, I've already done that. I was just waiting for it to come to minimum so I can put it on.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So hydration.
Thanks.
Now, what happens is hydration. When hydration is low, we'll see some graphs. Obviously the bolus effect won't be there. Even if you give the Lasix cannot increase the output unless there is a preload. It's just like the heart. Unless the preload is good enough, whatever the force of contraction, the afterload is the ejection volume is definitely not going to be good. So unless your hydration is good, the rapidity at which the peak is reached is going to be slow. So the time taken to reach peak activity will be slow. Now, when you take longer time to reach peak activity, and perfusion and extraction from the aorta to the renal through the renal artery by the kidney is slower, but your computer is pre-programmed to calculate differential function at a fixed time. It is going to calculate a differential function at a time when it is not optimally been extracted, and there might be errors in those. Second, because the load is not high, the time taken to clear from the parenchyma to enter the pelvis will also be slow. So sometimes when you're using these cortical transit times as parameters to see whether there's obstruction or non-obstruction, this may show abnormally high cortical transit times, and again giving you a false obstructive pattern. Then the slope at which it drains, like I showed you in the earlier pictures, it may be much slower. And if you are using a shorter time of recording, it may actually end up showing an obstructive pattern rather than a normal complete drainage. So this is another reason why you have to look at hydration. And this again can be overcome when you look at all the post-void and delayed pictures. But this, when you're looking at one of these parameters, these are artifacts which can alter the investigation. Now, the simple way to check whether hydration is adequate or not, especially these are all useful in unilateral kidney problems. When there is bilateral and both are significantly affected, of course, this is difficult to use as a parameter. But if there is a unilateral kidney, within the first 60 seconds, the normal kidney should have already started excreting. So that is one way you can look at it. Another way of looking at it is bladder activity should be seen within the third or fourth frames. So when you say that there is good bladder activity being seen, that means the normal kidney is excreting rapidly and it is entering the bladder. So that is an indirect way of saying your hydration is adequate. So look at the activity coming in the normal kidney and look at the bladder activity coming. If they're all seen within the first 2-3 frames, then it is more or less okay that your hydration is fairly acceptable. Now, again, examples, this is the same thing which I showed you. Because the hydration here, you can see in these frames, there is hardly any, this is not a catheterized sample. It is a regular patient, but you can see this hardly activity being seen. There is some activity, but it's not the dense activity you say. Then somewhere here, child has voided off. So whatever is accumulating is also gone off, but still it's coming very slowly, which seems to match this kidney's slow drainage. But probably because he was otherwise a normal kidney, that other one has come. But even this curve is not typically what you would expect. What you would expect is a rapid rise, peak activity, rapid downslope, and then tapering off like this. Even this is not a normal drainage curve. So it shouldn't be slow emptying like this. It should come down rapidly and then taper off like that. So both these curves and this put together tells you that hydration is not optimum. Now, like I said, many times this may not have much bearing, but in those situations where your difference between redundant pelvis, extrarenal pelvis with not much of compromised function versus actual obstruction where you need to optimize decision making is concerned, all the small things will matter. Now, the second point which we are looking at is bladder drainage. Nowadays, there is a lot of earlier the so-called well-tempered renogram as per the Nuclear Medicine Society, used to insist on catheterization. But presently, when we have started looking at other parameters like the post-void pictures, the delayed pictures, the bladder drainage per se may not have much effect as far as you are aware that the bladder is not drained. But in certain situation where you are not, for example, this patient, there has been, if you look at only this picture, it looks like persistent visualization of the ureter, dilated ureter, hydroureteronephrosis sort of picture. But this fellow, if you look at the delayed picture, after complete drainage of the bladder, you see nothing is there. It is no hold up, nothing. And this is what may happen, especially if you don't look at the delayed picture, or if there is actually a hydroureteronephrosis, which is otherwise a non-obstructing, non-refluxing megaureter. It might give you a picture of megaureter. And then to differentiate, the only situation where bladder drainage sort of becomes mandatory is if you are looking at VUG obstruction. So if you want this, if suppose this patient was a suspected VUG obstruction, hydroureteronephrosis, persistent gross hydroureter, MCU showing no reflux, so you need to differentiate between obstructive megaureter versus non-obstructive, non-refluxing megaureter. And so you would put a region of interest here in addition to what normally you put on the pelvis to rule out PUG obstruction. Now, when you do that, unless the bladder is empty continuously, your activity here may not mean anything. It may just take on some of the bladder activity and still show high activity, giving you a false impression of obstruction. So in those situations, you may need a bladder drainage. But again, in those, if you do a significant delayed picture, what you do at 4 hours or so, it may still show that the bladder is emptied and this so-called high hold up in the ureter would also disappear. So bladder drainage is something which you can use in these sort of situations, or other option, other situation where you get is a ureterocele in a duplex system where there is an obstruction. So that is again something you can use the bladder drainage to make sure that the ureterocele is not compressed and obstructing the drainage. So the effect of bladder drainage. So in this child, you can see bladder has been continuously drained. There's no activity, bladder activity, and there's no hold up. And again, this you can see the curves here because the bladder was not drained. It is drainage from the kidney into the bladder is slow, and this gives you a slower picture, which shows that it may be a significant hold up or maybe to some extent even an obstruction picture. Coming to the differential function, like I said, they are computer fixed software. Earlier DTPA, when they are using, they used to use 1 to 2 minutes. Most of them nowadays use end of 2 to 3 minutes is what they use. So at that point of time, the ROI is pre-drawn. And again, ROI depends on where you draw the ROI when you're calculating differential function, especially in those where you have a hydronephrotic extrarenal pelvis, but otherwise a fairly okay function. When you put the ROI on the whole kidney, it may give a hyper estimation of that kidney. The other thing, what happens is with respect to time at which you're recording, sometimes if you record very late, and the normal kidney is so effective, like you saw in the earlier picture, the normal kidney would have almost emptied out significantly. So sometimes the normal kidney would have already emptied out, and by the time you put the ROI, and if the ROI is late, it may show more activity in the affected kidney than in this normal kidney. So it's very important to know at what point the recording of the differential function is done. So that is another one of the reasons for hyperestimation. It causes for false, hyper functioning, so-called hyper functioning kidney in an obstructive kidney. One is how you put the ROI. Number two is late estimation of the differential function, especially when the other kidney is normal. And there are a few more reasons why you get so-called hyperfunction in the obstructive kidney, but there are occasional situations where it is an actual hyperfunctioning kidney. That will again come to that later. Now, what are the parameters we look at while reporting to say whether there is obstruction or obstruction? There have been more over years. 6 of them are parameters which are computer generation, and to this 60, another 56 clinical parameters. Clinical means patient status, ultrasound status, and all other parameters put together. Almost 120 parameters were generated to check. So this only goes to say that there is no uniform single parameter which can be used to detect or rule out obstruction. So what we need to understand is the way of doing the test and then utilize other associated parameters for us to just keep in mind. In addition to the nuclear medicine, the ultrasound parameters, the differential, the sequential changes in ultrasound and nuclear medicine when you have doubt, instead of one one-time report interpretation, and in ultrasound compensatory renal hypertrophy of the other side. So these are certain important parameters which you can keep in mind. T-half is something which is, again, like I said, influence what agents. Hello? Yeah. Somebody wanted to say something? Hello?
No, sir.
Can you hear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You wanted to say something?
No, sir.
Okay. So I'm not, see, this thing is very long, so I don't know what time you have. So you can interrupt me at any time. If we can always continue it as a second session later on some other day, depending on the time you have. Okay. So T-half, like I said, what is the agent, whether it's a tubular agent or a glomerular agent, the time and when the diuretic was administered, whether it's F20, F-15, F0 protocol, adequacy of hydration, presence or absence of catheter. This already you have seen in the pictures, how it affects the slope, and the slope is the one which is used to calculate the T-half. Of all these parameters which are used, some useful parameters which you can use to look at is, these are not, again, these are software driven, but looking at the picture, you can use it on your own. Even use, if you want, you can always sit with the nuclear medicine and develop your own parameters. What it looks as is output efficiency and normalized residual activity in the kidney. Now, this is something which you look at. So, if there are various normalization curves available, you don't need all those things. You can just look at the peak activity which was recorded in that kidney, and in a delayed picture, the activity which was remaining in that, and you have again various ratios. So, if it is 20%, if it is 50% of peak activity remaining at X time, it is significant, not significant. So there are many different normalized ratios available which are there, but this is more of academic interest. You can always go on and read more about it depending on what time you use it. But what it basically tells is what was the peak activity in the pelvis of that kidney, and what is the activity after a particular period of time. The particular period of time is something which you can fix. It can be at the end of the study, at the end of the recording, at the end of the delayed picture, whichever you want, but that is something you'll have to consistently keep, and they have ratios based on that. So if it is at 4 hours delayed picture, more than 10%. If it is at the end of those 20 minutes of recording pre-void, more than for 30%. So each one will have a fixed cutoff at which you can use, and that is more relevant because it is going to use the same patient's parameters as a control to measure the end result. So you're not going to have a fixed differential function as a cutoff. GFR is something which many nuclear medicine departments report. Now, GFR is basically available only when you use DTPA, because that is the only agent which is excreted by glomerular filtration. So nowadays we are not using DTPA, so this GFR may not be of any use. Instead of this, they give you effective renal plasma flow, which generally corresponds to GFR when they are using EC or MAC3. But when you are using GFR using DTPA, the technique which they use is what they call the gate technique, where they record the activity on a particular area from the posterior camera and give you, based on the disappearance, expected renal iota to renal activity extraction ratio and all those things, and it is generated as a software generated value. That is okay in adult patients because the surface area and the fat, the perinephric fat, the distance from the skin to the kidney and all are fixed. However, in children, this is very ambiguous, and the reports are not corresponding to the actual GFR, and it really doesn't give you any meaningful information. If you really want to calculate GFR, you should use the compartment technique, where you have to do multiple plasma sample technique. Ideally, 5, sometimes acceptable is 3 if you split the time. What they generally do is, there's typical biochemistry principle of inulin clearance. So the activity in the syringe is recorded, that is injected. So if it is 100 counts, after 15 minutes, blood sample is taken and see what is the count in the blood. After half an hour, again it is taken. So it is something like doing a glucose tolerant test sampling. So you keep recording and then see the disappearance of the maximum activity. So based on that, a GFR is derived. So this is not possible to do in children, sampling them 4 or 5 times. So it is not something which is used also routinely. So GFR, whatever is given in the reports is just something which needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, not really an absolute value which is of useful. But a split GFR again is only calculated by the differential function. So again, it doesn't have any meaningful information. If you know what is the differential function, that is equally good enough. So two important parameters which I told you in the beginning also is to look at the post-void frames and what is the count, maximum count, post-void count ratio. So this is something which you can use if you take lots of go back to your isotope scan, look at all the things and see. And only thing is you will have to get the ratio, the count of post-void. If you have recent ones, you can always ask the nuclear medicine person to go back to this thing and generate and look at that and see whether it corresponds to your diagnosis of obstruction or non-obstruction. Now, examples of regions of interest. Now, this is a patient where, and this is all computer, it's the same patient, you sit in the computer, you draw something differently, you'll generate different pictures, different reports. So we see that the aortic activity seems to be fairly okay. Bladder is filling up quietly early, kidney is seen quietly early, so hydrations are fairly okay. Then when you look at this, the region of interest in the left kidney has been drawn only on the cortical area, 41% differential function. If you look at both the picture, left kidney showing significant hold up, even the delayed picture, but definitely compared to the early static, there's some clearance. So probably a slow drainage, not a complete obstruction, 41%. So you would probably say, okay, let us wait and watch. But when you try to draw the ROI on the whole kidney, the picture of delayed and static has not changed, but the differential function has jumped from 40 to 52. Now, instead of 40, if this patient had been 40, say 39, 38%, and your cutoff for operating was 40%, we would have ended up operating this fellow correctly. But if you had used this ROI, you would have said, okay, this fellow's function is preserved, so we will not operate on him and we will not look at these parameters. But whatever this is saying, this is well-preserved function, so we will conserve. And after 3 months, when you did it correctly, this would have dropped to 20%. So single parameter, not of use. Look at all these things, and if you see these picture, definitely there is significant hold up in both, though there is some amount of clearance here. And when you use the ROI correctly, the function completely changes. So one important message to look at how the ROI is put. Background subtraction. Now, what background subtraction, especially these are important in patients who have bilateral problems where there is some amount of renal failure. Hello? You wanted to say something?
No, sir. As and when people are joining, we're hearing the click sound. So
Okay.
you can go on.
Just interrupt me and tell me when to stop if your time, your time for this thing is over, because I have no sense of time. So I'll just continue. You stop me.
Yes, sir.
And when you're using background subtraction, these are all the activity in the muscles, the other solid organs. Now, your subtraction is going to tell how much of this activity this is to take over. Because if the kidney is lying here, behind the kidney, the muscles and other organs will also be contributing to the activity in this area. So you will be putting a ROI here to subtract all the background activity, assuming that this entire area of background is the same. The muscles and all fat and other tissues here will be the same. Now, when you are looking, especially on the left side, you have spleen and other things which also act on a significant amount of background activity as compared to symmetrical organs, that is the psoas and other muscles on both sides. So if you put a background activity here, this is also going to take into account this clinic activity. So if the count is 100 and background is 20, as per this, your count here will be taken as 80, actual kidney count. But what is happening, you're taking the spleen also, so a significant extra amount you're subtracting. Whereas if the spleen had not been there and the muscles are the only things which is contributing, the background would have been only around 5. So instead of 95, you are giving only 80 as the overall activity for this kidney. So if you look at that, you see the way it is, the function here is 61%, as against when you put it on the area where normally you expect both the symmetrical organ activities here, it is 56%. So the same patient, by just changing the subtraction of the background activity, the function changes. So always it is preferable to use a background activity in a area where there is symmetrical activity. So no liver, no spleen, both psoas and other tissues are the common on this area. So generally it is used in the inferolateral areas for calculating the background activity. So effect of background activity. Coming to tubular assisting, MAC3 and EC versus DTPA. MAC3 and EC are tubular secretion. Most of them are good, but the extraction efficiency is better in EC compared to MAC3. MAC3 is only around 50-60, EC is more than 70%, and the background, because the extraction is more, the kidney to background ratio is also better. So even in borderline creatinine and all, you can use the tubular agents as again DTPA. So again, amongst that, because the extraction efficiency is EC is better than MAC3, EC is definitely better than MAC3 in situations where you have higher creatinine when you want to look at obstruction. So these again preferred in situations where you have renal failure and poor function. Now coming to some more comparison between DTP and EC. So these are examples of DTP and EC of the same patient. I'll just talk about that, how we got same patient, same time. This is a patient where we have used DTP. You can see the right kidney slowly going up. Probably hydration is also not good. So it is showing an obstructive pattern. Whereas if you use EC, it shows a non-obstructive pattern. This is one important difference where DTP and EC scores over DTPA. I mean, the tubular agent score over glomerular agent, especially when it rules out obstruction compared to what we said obstruction. Similarly, one more example. This is showing a, if not a typical obstruction, somewhere slowly it is starting to come down, but definitely continuous hold up. Whereas the EC shows good washout. Even when you look at the static images, these are corresponding patients. You can see the early static and the late static, 2 hours, 4 hours, immediate static, delayed. Within 3 hours, this is completely cleared up, whereas this is continuing to accumulate because the static, the glomerular filtration is slow. The accumulation continues to keep on increasing. So even in 4 hours. So this, if you looked at only parameters of delayed parameter, which is one of the important parameters which I've already stressed, using DTP, you would have said this fellow has an obstructive pattern if you leave off all these other parameters. Whereas if you had used EC, you know that obstruction is not. These are same patients done 48 hours apart. All these comparative pictures which I've put up here are same patients done 48 hours apart. So this is another example. You can see immediate static, significant hold up, 3 hours, some clearance, but still significant hold up. Whereas using EC in the immediate static itself, compared to this, there's very little hold up, and a delayed picture, there's absolutely no activities. Looking at split renal function, again, DTPA, the obstructed kidney here is showing 52%, whereas it is actually 35% on EC. Again, related to increased activity, persistent activity, earlier clearance on the normal kidney. Whereas here you see hugely dilated pelvis, significant hold up. In DT, both of them are showing significant hold up. DTPA 42% differential function, EC 25% differential. Same patient done 48 hours apart. How we did this information, around 8 years back, we did an institutional study where we compared DTPA versus EC. All patients underwent DTPA and 48 hours later underwent EC. So they were self-controls. They were all the same protocols which are used. And since it was not done at 3 weeks or 1 month or 4 months apart, it was almost same time comparison. The 48 hours was given basically for all the residual radioactivity to disappear. 32 patients were done, various age group, and you see the difference between in the 32 patient, in almost 14 patient, what DTPA showed as obstruction was non-obstructive on EC. In 6 patient, what was actual obstruction, the DTP had overestimated function, so we said as per cutoff, we would have otherwise waited because more than 40%, but we ended up operating because the EC showed it was significantly low, like the example which I showed you, 46 versus 25%. Additional benefits, sometimes it picks up other things like duplex and everything. And sometimes we also have DTPA showing very poor function, those in which we decide whether we should leave it alone, do a nephrectomy, or just put a PCN and all those things using 10% as cutoff. There have been non-functioning kidneys in DTPA which has been shown up as 10% and then salvaged by doing a procedure using EC. So these are, of course, studies which have done long back, but nowadays this is established, so most of us don't even look at doing DTPA. So this is an example which I showed you in the beginning. Another situation where we get a diatal crisis. So you do a patient, big child, 8 years, 10 years, 6 years, intermittent pain. You do an ultrasound, shows hydronephrosis, send them for an isotope scan, nothing, no obstruction. So these sort of situation, an index of suspicion is high. We should always try to do the scan at the time of obstruction or at the time of symptoms. One more option is to make sure you mimic the situation which caused the obstruction. Most of them, these are the situation where you can do a F-15 protocols, or the bolus which comes to the kidney and hits it is at a peak and maximum bolus at the peak activity. So modification of your Lasix protocols are very useful here. Same patient, when it was done, when the symptoms had almost disappeared, showing almost well-preserved function, complete clearance, but when it was mimicked by using the different protocol and when the symptoms were there, you can see that the function is low and there is significant hold up. And these are datal cases, and most of them are bigger children, suspicious of intermittent obstruction. What would you suspect in these people? Anybody? Hello? Are you there?
Calculi.
Calculi, calculi causes intermittent obstruction more commonly. Children. What?
External crossing vessels, sir.
Yeah. So that is one of the major reasons for late presentation, symptomatic presentations, typically a crossing vessel. So another child, you can see it's a gross hydronephrosis, but when we do the isotope scan, almost complete clearance with some hold up, function preserved. So in those situations, it is worthwhile to do a CT angio. You can see a typical crossing vessel causing the PUJ obstruction. You can see that, and that part, one of the frames here, but this is very clear. So that is a typical crossing vessel obstruction. So this is something where you'll need to modify your protocol to check that and add on additional investigations to confirm the diagnosis.
Sir, can we stop after 5 or 10 minutes, sir? OT, we have to start that.
So what we can do is, I can just run too quickly. These are all only examples now.
Yes, sir, sure.
Run through the examples. Maybe you can have a discussion sometime later. So the PUJ function compromise, this is typically what we normally get. So we don't have to worry about this. Upgoing curve, no T-halves at all, differential function of 30%. And you can see the differential function correspondingly here also at the end of 1 minute. This is only around 130 or 140, and this is 250. So you don't need great computer. You look at this at the end of 1 minute, 140 versus 260. So that itself will tell you it's 1/3, 2/3 roughly. So 30%, 60% differential function, what would be there? You do that all, do this all at your exercise on your own first. Like I said, keep a paper, do everything looking at the picture, then go back to the report and compare. That is the best way to learn. So compromise function, delayed pictures showing significant hold up, not emptying. Cine, which you can see clearly filling up and emptying on this side. Even after this completely emptied, this is still accumulating. It's still not started excreting, very clearly showing that the uptake is also low. Cortical transit is also low. It is still not reached the pelvis by the time this is gone. So usefulness of cine. Now with preserved function, PUJO. Why did we call PUJO? Preserved function, almost okay, but this is not coming down, still going up. So suggestive of a PUJO. Delayed picture shows significant hold up. So obviously this is something where the functional calculation would have been not correct. Now if you say, look at this 4851, I'll just come back after I finish the cine. So you can see this is filling up and emptying, almost disappearing completely. This is just increasing and increasing darkness and gradually expanding further. And you can see most of this, you can see that sharpness is not there, which suggests that there is no drainage. You can see when this was draining, there was that typical V-shaped thing which showed that it would have gone into the ureter. Here it's that blunted, rounded thing, which again shows that there is some hold up, and that you see at the end, this is definitely. Now with this sort of a picture, would you think this fellow would have had a good function, preserved function? With this sort of picture, do you think the function would have been preserved?
No, sir, it would be an overestimation.
Yeah, so if you look at this, here it says 4851, but you look here, again, it's around 130 or something, and here it's 240. So almost 1/3, 2/3. So this would be again roughly 3060 or 3366. And whereas here you say it's 4851. So there is something wrong. So we'll probably have to go back and look at the hydration and the other frames to see whether there was adequate bladder drainage. So that would have sort of given you a false high estimation. Non-obstructive, again here it looks like it's coming down and going up, function preserved, but when you look at the cine, it's holding up slow significantly, but by the end of the picture, most of it has cleared. So you know that it's a non-lateral. Bilateral is somewhere where cine is definitely useful, because bilateral, all the values, differential function and all those things may not have much useful information, because it only gives what is equally bad. So once you make sure your background activity, the creatinine is fine, your bladder drainage is okay, hydration is okay, the curves are all properly planned, then you look at the delay. You see at this is the initial thing. So function at the end of a few seconds, it's all equal. But in the delayed picture, both seem to be showing significant order, but more so here. You can see this sort of a cutoff, probably, and sometimes an intrarenal pelvis also. Here, there is some amount of emptying of the calyces. So when you go to the cine, you can see that both are very slowly filling up. And it's not, and this one, even the callus is not fully filled up. So definitely both have compromised. Within that, this is filling the calyces itself very slowly. So probably this is more compromised than this, but both are at the end of cine are showing that it's not draining out at all. So in this, when you looked at the late picture, this is definitely still holding on, and this has started filling up the other calyces. So probably this is more compromised in function, slower filling compared to this. Hyperfunction, again, like I said, sometimes there are various other reasons. Right is going up, right is 51%. Delayed shows significant hold up in right, again something which cannot have a normal function. And when you look at the cine, left is emptied out, even right is continuing to fill up, and end of the picture it is still just increasing activity. So bilateral pictures, differential function and all is not very important. If your drainage is here, you can see in this, bladder is not at all seen even at the end of so long. There's no catheter in this patient. Catheter, sometimes if it is there, you would see some activity coming out like this into the tube. Not the bladder is empty because catheter is there. There is no catheter. Later on, catheter is not there, but you can see in the delayed picture, slowly bladder is filling up. But definitely this hold up, this is come down compared to that. So again, another bilateral picture, ultrasound and all put together, but both of them are significantly cleared up in delayed. If you look at these two pictures, this is something which you would consider surgical intervention, because everywhere it is significantly held up. But here, significant hold up, but you can see bladder is already started to fill. So that means though it is holding up bilaterally, there is definitely emptying into the bladder. Early statics also showed some clearance, and post this thing is showing completely no activity at all in the bladder or in the kidney. And this function, these patients are, if you had gone only by the ultrasound and the early pictures, there were gross hydronephrosis on both sides. So you need to put all the parameters together, including the information which you get on the ultrasound. So like I said, hyperfunction could be due to wrong ROI in the background estimation, late calculation when there is a unilateral problem and the other kidney is already drained off, or when you put whole kidney as against only the cortex. Occasionally, there might be a true hyperfunction, very early stages where there is transient increase in the blood flow to compensate, especially in this Dietl's crisis type of picture, where you will have an acute hyperemic compensatory hyperemia, which may cause a true this thing. Subnormal contralateral functionings are sometimes known. Instead of the compensatory hypertrophy, there will be normal function. So actual expectation compared to that, it will be a subnormal function. So that is the reason this is shown as hypertrophy. And early stages may be a compensatory hypertrophy in the affected kidney itself. So I think I get running out of time. Just another example for VUJ. How you see the delayed picture, you can see significant activity here. VUJ windows, when they put the VUJ windows, you don't need the graph, but you can make out from here that there is significant hold up here compared to this kidney. And when you look at that, at the VUJ, significant hold up, not emptying into the bladder, whereas the other kidney has this hold up, but gradually emptied into the bladder. So bilateral hydroerythronephrosis, significant VUJ obstruction at the left side, ultrasound, this picture, dilatation, and all put together tells you that there is significant VUJ obstruction. Cine again will sort of help you in looking at that. You see that it is emptying, continuing to hold up significantly on this side, both sides. But when you put all the parameters together, it is more on one side. So as an example of that patient. So various other artifacts can happen. See, this is example where the function was set 3%, but this is again because of very slow drainage, and you see the significant activity is still there at the end of in the delayed picture. So this so-called 3.9% might not be a correct estimation. And those sort of pictures, when you have, useful to do a additional test, like I did a CT angio. This is a child in which they repeatedly reported 7% function, number one, Number two, ultrasound, because the pelvis was so huge and coming down, when they kept the ultrasound cut off, they kept on reporting this as hydroureteronephrosis. None of them showed hydroureteronephrosis here, but all ultrasound kept, even the best ultrasound centers kept on reporting as hydroureteronephrosis because it was not matching this picture. You went and got a MR urography, and you could say this is a typical PUJ. The pelvis is so low that the dilated pelvis itself was, with the shouldering, being reported as hydroureter. So I think we will stop here. If any about the use of DMSA and other things, probably we'll leave it for another day. So any questions or anything at this stage?
Anand,
Ah,
am I audible?
yeah.
The presentation has been excellent. Our excellence. We would definitely like to have a follow-up of this, and I will talk to you and we'll fix up some other time.
Yeah,
A
sure.
lot of home messages. One or two small queries. One is said about the background activity. We have a control of checking what is the background score and taking it out, or it's all being done by them and we just have to be cognizant of this.
No, background activity is used by the compute. See, basically it is radioactivity which is detected by the gamma camera. When you're putting the gamma camera over the whole body, and that is the recording. The recording is your raw data in a computer. You can play around with the computer and do anything you want. So where you put your ROI, it will subtract. So people who are regularly doing pediatric nuclear medicine will know what to do and use the correct parameters. Maybe it will be useful if you remember, we had one PG and everybody's visit to Murli Nadik Center, where he showed us all the thing. Maybe it may be, once all these things settle down, it might be worthwhile just as a revision for you all to have actually go there, see it being done, or if not seeing it being done, sit in the computer and look at how you can get all this, convert this raw data into reports. So background activity is wherever you put the ROI, that background activity is subtracted from the kidney activity.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anand. But anyway, I'll open the house for questions and discussion and also input from Dr. Ramchandra sir.
Yeah. Oh, sir, good morning. I never knew you were also there.
He is regular in all our classes, boss.
Good morning, Anand.
Morning.
Anand,
Long
namaskara.
Namaskaram, sir. Long time. Nice to hear your voice.
Howದು. I was also looking forward to listening to this lecture. It was very nice. It was a very detailed discussion. So I don't think I have any queries so far. So it is very clear, and so many new things I learned. And maybe when I look at these scans again, I will, if I get an opportunity, because you must be knowing now, I have stopped working now.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
not going to work anymore. I have retired from work.
But I think your academic inputs are very, very essential to all the students.
Yeah. That will continue because that's a passion which will continue.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anand.
Thank you, sir.